To be a Christian is to be a disruptor. Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Shuree, and when I first started as the creative director at UYWI, I was broken. I'd given up on the church in America, and I'd stopped doing corporate worship altogether. Church was not a safe place for me to be, especially being a woman of color in America. 2016 through 2020, church for me was hostile. It seemed like no one could agree on what lives mattered, what constituted the sanctity of life, and some believed it was only in the womb, and some believed that it didn't extend to the streets. And I personally couldn't bear going into spaces that by their very silence yelled loudly that I didn't belong or anybody that looked like me or came from my culture. While working at UYWI, 2020 hit, and y'all know what that was, but I believe it was the second civil rights movement in our country. It was a racial reckoning. And I'll never forget the day that I saw Ahmaud Arbery chased down like an animal and killed in the streets. I wept. And I remember that day that the leadership team, my brothers, they came alongside me. And they really made space for my tears. And in that moment, I felt really embarrassed because I couldn't hold it together that day. But I also felt for the first time in a very, very long time, loved. And what I learned at that moment is there can be communities of believers who hold on to Jesus while fighting for justice and also caring for one another. And being able to see that modeled for me changed my life. UYWI held space for me in a time when the church was still trying to figure out if systemic racism was even real. UYWI gave me the theological handles to see that righteousness and justice go hand in hand in the kingdom. They taught me about the ultimate disruptor of culture, and that's Jesus. They weren't afraid of my questions. They weren't asking me to check my culture, my pain at the door. Instead, for almost 3 years, UYWI spoke life over me, saying, Shuree, you are loved, you belong, and you are called to lead. And it was through this restorative leadership experience with UYWI that I stand here today as a woman of color who's done deep work to heal not only from my racial trauma, but spiritual trauma. I am a woman who's a leader, who's more excited about the gospel now than I have ever been. And UYWI stood with me through the breaking, but now they're standing with me in the healing. And this is a testimony to the leadership process at UYWI and how they develop urban leaders externally, but in my case, I benefited as a staff member. So fast forward, and true to the UYWI model of developing and launching leaders, I'm stepping out to relaunch my creative agency, 4K More. 4K More exists to create art that elevates marginalized voices and inspires systemic change. And UYWI will partner with me in this venture, but they'll also be releasing me from staff so that I can work with clients around the world who need a creative agency ran by a Black multicultural woman who will, along with a diverse team of artists, create content that authentically represents urban culture and helps to shift mindsets to a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive world. This is the kingdom.